It's all yours, Maureen.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to hear about loneliness in seniors. I'm Maureen Harris, and I've been studying social groups and loneliness for the past 2 years as a visiting researcher at the Digital Health and Happiness Lab at Georgetown University. So, in addition to my research, my perspective on this topic is influenced by my personal experience, which includes teaching, coaching, parenting, as well as tending to elderly parents. So, I have a number of different hats I bring to this research and to this talk. This topic became quite personal to me this past February when my brothers and I moved my 97 and 98-year-old parents, married for 74 years, from a religious graduated community in Florida, where they had lived for 35 years, to a living facility in Falls Church at their request. 2 years ago, the Florida community eliminated the on site nursing home. So when my dad developed dementia a year ago, at the same time that my mom's sciatica increased to the level where she needed a walker, there was really no place for them to live together. My dad was ineligible to live in assisted living with my mom. So my mom asked us to find a place for them near my brother and me. As you may imagine, having to adjust to a new situation is an enormous effort when you are in your late 90s. But I am delighted to tell you that 4 months later, my parents are peaceful and my mom has made friends. I am going to dedicate this presentation on how to assess and address the risk of loneliness to my parents, Dot and Paul Felber. The moving is a huge transition, to be sure, and it probably doesn't surprise you that any kind of transition can make people particularly vulnerable to loneliness. The age group designated as seniors, 55 and older, if you live in Arlington, experience many, many transitions. And the thing about transitions is that sometimes we choose them and sometimes we don't get to choose. So we've had transitions, some big, some small, some we wait for eagerly, and some that are totally unwelcome. So any of them affect our social network. So transitions we choose, like retiring or taking care of grandchildren, moving, volunteering, taking a class, pursuing a new interest hobby, or ones we don't choose, like a relationship that ends, or getting sick, or sustaining an injury, a friend moving away or passing away, aging parents who need help. Feeling lonely is a normal part of being human, just like feeling happy is. And it's natural to feel lonely when we experience transitions because our relationships change. However, we may be at risk for long term loneliness if we don't adjust our social interactions when transitions occur. Loneliness can be triggered by a transition and it can remain long after the transition, getting more severe over time. So today I'm going to talk about a tool we can use to measure the risk of loneliness, some research-based strategies to strengthen social networks, and ways we can adopt effective personal and interpersonal communication patterns. I want to say up front, this presentation is by no means comprehensive. Instead, I hope to offer you a few pragmatic strategies and a few interpersonal communication patterns that may help to reduce loneliness. So this past January, I went for a routine checkup to my doctor who just became affiliated with Inova, and I was asked to fill out a social health questionnaire. Maybe you've had to do the same. The first four questions I was surprised to see were taken word for word from part one of the Duke Social Support Index, or the DSSI, a tool I'm about to talk with you about. The DSSI has two parts. The first section of the DSSI measures how many and what kinds of interactions a person is having during a week's time. The second section measures how satisfied a person is with his or her relationships. So the first part of the scale looks at quantity and type of social interaction. And the second part looks at how socially content a person feels. The original DSSI had 35 items and was originally published in 1989, normed on women 65 and older. It's been tested and shortened and tested again, and I'm using this 11-item, highly valid and reliable version. Some of you may have downloaded this scale and looked at it over in advance of this talk. No worries if you have not done so, as I've listed the items here. So part one, other than members of your family, how many people in the Washington, D.C. area do you feel you can depend on or feel very close to? Number two, how many times during the past week did you spend time with someone who does not live with you? That is, you went to see them, or they came to visit you, or you went out together. Number three, how many times did you talk to someone, friends, relatives, or others, on the telephone or text with them in the past week? So they called you or you called them. And number four, about how often did you go to meetings of clubs, religious meetings, or other groups that you belong to in the past week? I want to draw your attention to question 3, where I've added the words text with them in orange. Although this phrase is not on the scale, I think texting to connect is an important measure of how some seniors communicate. For example, over COVID, I started a Dana Carvey church lady Zoom group, and that group has morphed into a group text that is still active. My 97-year-old mother texts me more often than she calls because she doesn't hear that well, and she can make the letters large on her phone. So if you are measuring communication with others, risk of loneliness, it makes sense to include texting. Part 2 of the index, number 1. Does it seem that your family and friends, people who are important to you, understand you? Number 2, do you feel useful to your family and friends, people who are important to you? Number 3, do you know what is going on with your family and friends? Number 4, when you are talking with your family and friends, do you feel you are being listened to? Number 5, do you feel you have a definite role or place in your family and among your friends? Number 6, can you talk about your deepest problems with at least some of your family and friends? And finally, number 7, how satisfied are you with the kinds of relationships you have with your family and friends? If you take a look at question 7, because people are all different, it's how a person perceives his or her relationships that is critical. It's whether he or she feels satisfied, closely connected to family and friends. There isn't a magic number of relationships that everyone should have, and this scale doesn't have a right score. What the DSSI can tell us is if someone has increased risk. If many of a person's answers show a lack of social activity and or a lack of feeling socially connected. So I'm going to pause here and invite you to take a few minutes to fill out the DSSI for yourself or for someone you know in your family or among your friends or neighbors whom you think might be lonely or at risk for loneliness. If you have not downloaded the DSSI handout from the website, feel free to do so now. So I'm going to wait for about 5 minutes and let you do that.
Have you posted the website?
I thought it was available to folks in the advance. Is that not true?
It
I
was in
thought
the
it was
email.
posted in
It was
advance.
in the email.
In the
Okay.
email. Sorry, not on the website, in the email. But this is a short enough scale. There are only about 11 questions. So if you want to just take a look at them and not write it down and just think about it, or if you'd rather scratch some answers, I'm just going to give people a few minutes who want to fill it out. But
Can you
it's
go back to part one for a second?
absolutely. Why don't we start there and I'll linger there for a few minutes.
And just, if I can clarify a minute, we
Okay.
did post the assessment tool
I
on the
posted the
A&D
link in the
website.
chat. It's in the chat now.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite you as you're filling this out or just reading through the items to put any questions that have come up about the scale in the chat. And we're going to pause for a few minutes and take any questions that people would like answered. Mhm. I see the chat. I can answer this. Absolutely. Does this apply to Zoom meetings? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would call that a social group unless it's one-on-one with a Zoom, if that makes sense. Let me clarify that. So you would attend a social group. This would be a Zoom group meeting. Or if, like, I FaceTime with my son who's out in Seattle, that would be a one-on-one. When you finished, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I have a different question related to that same uh, question about how many times during the week do you spend time with people? Do you, would that also include, if somebody is working, I mean, obviously you're going to be spending time with people every workday,
Mhm.
or do you just want to include social interactions?
I think that's a really good point. I think there is a difference between conversations that are sort of about work and conversations that are personal. And I think this social support is looking more at people who you feel know you and whom you feel you know. So I have, I go to Georgetown to work. There is one person there who has become my friend, who I would talk with, and share a fair amount. There are other students there I know casually, but I have some nice one-on-one conversations with them. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Okay. I think I think really number 7 is the kind of key question. Like, do you feel like you are known? Do you feel like you are loved? Do you feel like you have people who get you and who love in return? Do you feel emotionally like you're steady and buoyant? And that, I think, is the big question.
There could be some relationships where you don't have a good connection, for example, with your family, but you've accepted that and it's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a brother who is lovely, but is basically disconnected from me, and has been since we were both young adults. He is very absorbed in his wife's family and his community. That's just how it is. He's a very nice man. We're just not particularly close.
And I see Carolyn's comment that a lot of her answers are, it depends. Some
Mm.
people you can talk with, some people you can't. And
Right.
I guess the point is, are there enough that you can, that you don't feel lonely, as opposed to most of the people you know you're not connected that tightly with?
Absolutely. I think that's number 6, and that's at least some. Are there one or two people that you feel like when it's really hard, you can talk with them?
I find some of the questions interesting because a lot of them for me, it feels like, well, it depends. Even the questions about, I think there was a question about, do you go out to groups or to religious household, religious meetings? Well, it's summertime. I'm not doing that as much. I'll do it a lot more in the fall or the winter. So a lot of it feels like it depends where we are. And sometimes when I'm not doing that, I'm lonely, but I know that it will change.
Right.
Time changes it. And the same for a lot of the friends. Your friendships morph. Even people you've been close to for a number of years, they go up and down.
Mm, certainly. That's true. I think that's true for a lot of people. Do people need more time? Is there some way we can sort of survey? Uh, do you want to put in the chat if you need more time? Or now, how about if you're finished? Because I'll continue unless people want more time.
Yeah, let's give up. So
Great, thank you.
finished.
Anybody else finished? Are we good?
I'm finished,
Okay,
Liz.
that's you. Yeah. All right. Great. Okay.
So
Well, there will be time. You can do this later. I'm not going to be referring to it, the actual scale, other than in the context of other content. So you're welcome to finish this later if you need more time. And I will continue on then. Okay. Um, great. Thank you for those questions. Let's go on to strategies. The first part of the DSSI measured both one-on-one communication and group attendance and is based on research, of course, demonstrating that these two strategies support feelings of social connection. Not surprisingly, the most effective strategies address those two kinds of communication and connection. One-on-one conversations. So 5 minutes talking with someone you don't know significantly boosts endorphin levels in your body. A small increase in the amount of communication with family members and or friends also results in increased levels of self-reported happiness. I think it's really interesting that the question on the first part of the DSSI asking how often an individual communicates with another person includes the answers of a friend, or another person is defined as a friend, a family member, or other. Talking with people you don't know, smiling and making conversation when you're going to the doctor, or admiring the pet of someone walking by, or talking with the grocery checkout person is really good for us. You may be familiar with the research that came out, I think about a year and a half ago, discussing the ways that a brief conversation with a stranger was found to have a totally disproportionate effect on a boost in someone's mood. So talking or FaceTiming with someone whom you feel close to also makes us feel better. That's feels a little more logical, but both are true. So the power of groups. This is my area of study, so full disclosure. Groups get people engaged with others because they're not alone. Groups provide a social safe space where members can choose how much they want to interact. And groups provide a setting where people who like to do the same activity or share the same values can get to know each other. For example, I'm taking a swimming stroke class because I'd like to be able to swim for exercise. The instructor tells me exactly what to do, and I do it as best I can. I smile at the other students, but I don't have to talk to anybody if I don't want to. I can watch and listen to my classmates and see if there's anyone I'd like to get to know better before I ever have to do anything. And I'm starting to get to know people who like to swim for exercise, which is a whole new community for me. And it makes my workouts a lot more fun to see people I know and just be able to say hello to them. So that whole idea of being in a setting where people like what you like has a huge effect for me. Professionals in psychology, sociology, computer science, business have all studied social groups, many of the research focusing on the development of social connections. I think the power of groups is hugely underestimated. It is a potent tool to counter loneliness for anyone, including people who are socially anxious or even those who have difficulty communicating. So there are different types of groups. Let's look at scheduled and unscheduled groups. Groups can occur at scheduled times, such as taking a class or going birding with the Northern Virginia Birding Club, which my daughter does. Groups can be unscheduled, like going to a dog park at the same time on Saturday mornings and routinely seeing the same group of people with their dogs. One way to explore unscheduled groups is to routinize your errands or activities. Try going to the farmer's market or taking a walk in your neighborhood at the same time, 1 or more days a week for a month, and see if you run into the same people. If you don't, you could try another activity. Group meetings. Does it matter how often a group meets? And is there an optimal number of groups to attend? It takes time to get to know people. So people who attend groups that meet 1 or more times a week report greater emotional connection than those who attend groups that meet less frequently. Is there an optimal number? People who belong to multiple groups that meet at least once a week also report higher levels of happiness than those who belong to only one group. However, just like I talked about earlier with the DSSI, people's social needs vary significantly, but there seems to be a minimal level of interaction that we need to feel socially connected. So I like to share a study that was just done last fall, where people were self-described as introverts or extroverts, and they were asked to increase their social activity a little for a week. Individuals chose how to define that and what to do. And they were a little more social by their own definitions for a week. At the end of the week, both groups were asked how they felt about the extra social interaction. And the researchers were surprised to find out that both groups found extra interaction made them feel better. They thought the introverts were going to hate it, but the introverts actually liked it. So this research suggests it may be interesting to try out being a little more social and see how it makes you feel. Types of groups. So volunteering. Volunteering reminds us that other people are struggling and need our help. It gets us out of the mindset of thinking only about our own pains and troubles and helps us shift our focus to other people's critical needs for things like housing or food. Choosing an area of need we deeply care about results in volunteers reporting greater satisfaction, and helping strangers and not people you know causes the body to produce endorphins, sometimes called the helper's high. So volunteering best practices means being thoughtful about choosing an area of need that you really care about. So for me, the past 10 years, I've been providing academic and career resources to families with neurodiverse teens and young adults. And the past 3 years, I've been singing in my church choir, which has been great. I looked at a website last week that listed 4,189 nonprofit organizations with volunteer opportunities near Arlington, including the Arlington Neighborhood Village and Volunteer Arlington, which is a database of volunteer activities. In this area, we are fortunate to have so many ways we can give to people who need our help. Types of groups learn something new. When we challenge ourselves to do something new, our brain literally grows new synapses. And as we get more competent, our confidence increases. Research shows that joining a group of people who want to learn what you want to learn or do what you want to do makes it more likely you will feel more connected to them than if you join a group where you're not that interested, because you share the same interest. It is not easy to be a beginner. Let me tell you, my swim class and a lesson in humility. But it's easier to be a beginner with other beginners. It's normal to feel uncomfortable at first when attending a new group, especially one where you are learning a new skill. You'll feel more comfortable over time. You can also ask a friend to go with you, just to buffer that feeling of newness and awkwardness. So I would like to talk about some online groups for seniors. Particularly true for seniors who have mobility challenges or difficulty hearing or seeing. There are online activities of people doing things together. Some online communities thrive on support, and others are organized around specific topics or hobbies. For example, the AARP Virtual Community Center offers online events such as cooking classes and movies. Emotional support and connection frequently occur with people who interact online on a regular basis. So I have a friend who set up an online quilting Zoom group during COVID, still going. And I have another friend who attends an online ALS support group. She's been going for 5 years now. I am guessing that many of you cherish relationships with children and teens, maybe your own grandchildren or young neighbors or friends' children or grandchildren. So I've included a section on social media research as it relates to young people. Although the news is full of the negative effects of social media, especially for teenage girls, online chat, video text groups like Discord and fandoms like Glee can provide a supportive social space for those who struggle to find friends in their community. For example, I'm running a study with a Georgetown graduate student who identifies as bisexual and a woman of color. Sayani and I are examining the ways online communities can function as a source of social support and friendship. I want to make just one point, and that is technology is a tool. We can use it to communicate and connect and create, or we can scroll endlessly and pummel our self-esteem by comparing ourselves unfavorably to other people. But social media in and of itself is not bad. I'm guessing some of you look at Facebook frequently to stay in touch with friends and family, for example. Embedded in Vivek Murthy's Surgeon General Vivek Murthy's 25-page report on social media and youth mental health, published last year, was one paragraph containing research studies that support the value of social media for some teens that I'd like to show you now. I'm just gonna, it's 2 slides of content. I will just read through them. Social media can provide benefits for some youth by providing positive community and connection with others who share identities, abilities, and interests. It can provide access to important information and create a space for self-expression. The ability to form and maintain friendships online and develop social connections are among the positive effects of social media use for youth. These relationships can afford opportunities to have positive interactions with more diverse peer groups than are available to them offline, and can provide important social support to youth. The buffering effects against stress that online social support from peers may provide can be especially important for youth who are often marginalized, including racial, ethnic, and sexual and gender minorities. For example, studies have shown that social media may support mental health and well-being by enabling peer connection, identity development, and management, and social support. I hope this content makes you feel a little more optimistic about social media. What I'm not going to talk about today that may make you feel even more optimistic is the whole area of how to manage tech use, which is often a huge concern. So I will leave this topic with one comment, which is that there are several tremendous tech products out there that are designed to manage tech use and are available for teens and adults. Okay, last section, adopting effective personal and interpersonal patterns, emotional skills. This last section identifies just a few patterns, two that these are just a few super strategies to add to your social emotional toolbox. There are many, many strategies out there, but I've chosen three really powerful ones. The first two are about how we talk to ourselves and the mindset we have. The third examines how we interact with others. So be grateful, be optimistic, be curious. Be grateful. Keeping a gratitude journal, giving thanks, practicing being mindful and present in the moment. Expressing gratitude has been found to be a powerful tool to increase optimism and happiness. I expect, there is so much research on gratitude, you can tell, there are 4 bullets of there. And I expect there to be more and more because it appears to have extraordinary potential to counteract feelings of hopelessness and negativity. We all know, for example, how high the rate of suicide is among veterans. And there is an intervention that has just been tried to teach them to hunt for the good stuff, to search for positive things throughout the day, every day. In the same way they were in combat, forced to search and scan for danger, they're taught to scan for good. Preliminary results show that vets who adopted this practice reported an increase in feelings of happiness and a decrease in levels of depression within 6 weeks. Optimism. Optimists perceive that they have more social support than non-optimists, and optimists report a deeper level of connection with their friends than non-optimists. Optimists expect people to be friendly, and they expect people to like them, which helps optimists be open to liking new people and making friends. Interestingly, the research does not indicate that optimists have more friends, but that they perceive their relationships as more connected, more satisfying. Finally, be curious. Asking questions makes a person more appealing and likable. When we ask questions and follow up questions, people feel appreciated and respected. So I'd like to just linger for a moment here on the final content slide. We all like to tell our stories to entertain, to connect, to feel valuable. But if we shift our conversational style a little bit to ask a few more questions and follow-up questions and learn other people's stories, then our conversational partners feel connected and valued. One study done by Harvard Business School found that employees who asked 3 questions in a conversation were perceived as skilled at listening, understanding, validating, and caring for others. I've made a little crib sheet for 8 takeaways from this talk. Once an instructional designer, always an instructional designer, so I can't resist a little crib sheet. I'll just go through it briefly. Loneliness is a normal, healthy reaction, just like feeling happy, that all humans experience, but protracted loneliness is not healthy. To decrease loneliness, increase your one-on-one people contact by talking to strangers, neighbors, casual friends, or people you feel close to. Number 3, attend multiple groups of people who like to do what you like to do, or who are learning something new you would like to learn. Number 4, choose groups that meet at least once a week for at least several months, so there is time to get to know people. Number 5, when you attend a group, watch and listen and get to know people, and speak only when you want to. Number 6, online groups can provide social connection and support. Number 7, best tech practices means viewing tech as a tool to incorporate into a balanced life, not as inherently bad or good. Number 8, adopt effective personal and interpersonal patterns of being grateful, optimistic, and curious. I'd love your feedback. Please answer the 2 questions on this slide. One thing I liked, one thing I would change. Please put it in the chat. And now I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, we've got a couple from Liz down there.
Okay. So Liz, I see, how does this relate to caregivers? How can they expand their social networks given? Oh my goodness, that is a tremendous question. My daughter, who's 23, was diagnosed with autism at age 2. And I honestly felt that my entire social group was therapists for a while. I think a great source, and my mother is now, of course, doing caregiving with my dad with dementia. I found that where she lives, there's a caregivers group who meet once a week. So I would start there because they would know you have limited time, and those kinds of groups. I know there are some of those on AARP, and I'm guessing, I have not researched the different online groups for caregivers, but I'm sure there are a bunch of them out there. But I know my mom has one over at Goodwin House, so that she attends that weekly. Does that give you what you need with that question? Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Well, I had a question about, you talked about there's no optimal number of groups to belong to, but more groups is better.
Yes.
But isn't there kind of an upper limit to where you start to get overwhelmed and stressed and can't really focus on the groups that you're in
Grouped
because
out.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Absolutely. It's always a balance. It's always a balance. And we, as humans, I'm a Libra, so I'm even worse at this than most people. But there's always that you sort of swing to one side and then swing back. So there's always that checking in with yourself. Is this making me feel better? Is this too much? And you just have to do trial and error. And of course, because we're humans, we change. So you find a good balance, and then the next, month, it's feeling too much again. The participant who talked about how her summers change and go different socially. I think that's a great example. In the summers, most of us our participation shifts significantly. So I think you just have to keep, checking your own barometer. How is this working for me? How is this feeling? And it's okay to say, yeah, it's a little too much. Um, Does that answer sufficiently? I'm
Yeah,
gonna answer
yeah.
them, and if it's not sufficient, I'm gonna ask you to say, "Please add more," or something in the chat, because I kind of feel like I'm talking into the air. Okay? So the next question I'm gonna answer, it's in the chat. I was taught never to ask questions because it would make me look dumb and vulnerable. Immigrants don't want to be perceived as greenhorns. Absolutely. Let me talk a little bit about that, because I thought it was interesting when I read a little bit more deeply into that study. What the questions were more about was about the other person. So it wasn't a question of, "Hi, I don't know this, could you help me?" It was, "How did you come to work for this company? And what has been your favorite project so far?" So they were curiosity questions about the individual. They were not asking for help questions. And so I think that kind of communication is the kind where people feel the most valued, because you're literally letting them tell you their story. My kids, they're gotten used to it, but they used to just cringe when I go to Trader Joe's, because I always talk to the cashier, and they always have these interesting stories. And so I would find out all the stuff, and I'd come home and I'd say, "Do you know that she has 9 brothers and sisters? They're from Afghanistan, and she's never lived without them, and they are now scattered across the country, and they do a weekly," that kind of information that you find when you talk to someone and ask them about who they are and what they do. Kind of a long question, but a long answer, but I hope that makes sense. Okay, thank you for the compliments. I appreciate that in the chat. Um, oh, and someone is giving a good idea that Meetup might have caregiver groups, and I'm almost positive I saw that on the AARP website for sure. So I'm glad this person brought up that groups can be a source of pain and competition. Um, and that as we age, we may be more vulnerable to those, or more a target of those slights. Obviously, you need to pick groups that respect you, that show respect for you. And if you go to a group and you do not perceive that in your first meeting, then I think that's not the group for you. I honestly think that's why a lot of uh, online groups have popped up for people who are seniors. Um, I work at Georgetown. I'm the oldest person there by far, by far. I'm among graduate students, and even the professors are mostly younger than I am. And I feel it. I feel it. But I get enough positive from the students I work with, and I kind of ignore the rest. But it's definitely a situation where you have to pick a group where you feel welcomed and valued. I'm looking at the next one in the chat. More interested in Zoom, but also took away that more Zoom meetings are occurring and taking away that sort of casual interaction. Um, I agree. I agree. It's a two-edged sword. It is more efficient. I can talk to a whole bunch of people on this chat and this talk than I could easily in a in-person forum, I think, but it does make for a different kind of connection. I will say that I have hope that Zoom is going to become more sophisticated. and that there will come a time where it will be able to interact more as if it's in person, and where there'll be little small groups where the person who is overseeing the Zoom, the leader, as it were, can actually hear different groups at once. So you're in a classroom with like different teachers. So I think the technology will continue to evolve, but it will never be in person. Not the same. Let's see. Is the tool you mentioned used by your peers in other parts of the country? I have absolutely no idea. So that DSSI has been used in all kinds of settings for research. So I've seen it used on, all kinds of populations. And like I saw one for people who are chronically ill, a version, because obviously they're not going to be going out. And it's an abbreviated tool so that people who get tired quickly, you can still get a beat on if they feel lonely. And as I said, I see that ANOVA has adopted a chunk of it to use as a screening tool. I don't know if they had me fill it out because I just turned 65 or if it's because they just have everybody do it now. I couldn't tell. So that's a really good question, Cheryl, and I do not have an answer.
Okay.
A list of the studies. Oh, I would be happy to provide the research for this talk. Happy to do that. Oh, great. I'm glad that it was, yeah. Welcome everyone who's new, welcome. I believe the presentation, I think, I'm going to be, so I'm in the process of finishing my work at Georgetown, well, nearly finishing it, but also starting a small company, a nonprofit, because I find my skill set is I'm better at disseminating information. I was a teacher and I'm less patient researcher. So I'm not quite sure legally where I am. I'm still consulting with someone. So as soon as I learn, I should know in the next month what my position is legally in terms of posting this. And at any rate, I will post something, so just wait a little bit till I can get that figured out with my company formation. Thank you.
And I assume the same is true if somebody wants to reach out to you one-on-one. They should just have a little patience, and once you
That would be
work things
wonderful.
out.
Yes. Yes. If it's time sensitive, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can certainly reach out to me there. But yes, in a month I'll be in a better place to be able to offer you a professional email that is not Georgetown, for example, and that ways to contact me. Oh, I love this one because actually I'm an introvert. As an introvert, I enjoy my alone time and can sometimes become irritated when it's interrupted, at times not of my own choosing. How do I develop gratitude for this? If you can do that, you can teach me. But I think how I protect my time as an introvert, because I really need it daily or I get enormously grumpy. As I use a visual cue for people. I put on headphones. Whenever, even if I'm not listening to anything, I put on headphones, whether I'm reading or whether my children have learned as they were little, oh, don't touch, don't go to your mommy, unless it's emergency, she's reading. And when I'm in a work setting, instead of the earbuds, which people can't really see, so they'll start talking to you, I put on the big old Bose noise deafening ear, and that seems to work. Oh, I love that. And someone just said I used to wear a hat to signal I was having quiet time. I love that. So yeah, I just find the visual cue. Then I don't have to tell my children 55, or even my husband, who I love, but who's an extrovert. So I have to protect my time. Are there any other questions?
It doesn't look like it. Gary, do you see anything
No,
else?
I
Okay,
don't see anything.
We're good? Okay.
all right.
Well,
Well,
it's been a total pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. I will definitely assemble that list of references. And when my company is a little more solid and I have received my legal advice for what I need to do, I will get back to you. I think it should be about a month. It is summer, so I'm a little bit at the mercy of people's vacations. But I'm going to aim for 4 weeks. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
okay, and we thank you, Maureen. This has been very helpful, and I think everybody has enjoyed taking the test and getting all of that information. So we appreciate your time. Thanks for the presentation. So
Thank
it's a
you.
little bit after 11 now, so just want to close out this session. Remind everybody that next week, Coffee and Conversation, our guest will be Scott Taylor, who is part of the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington. And he's going to talk about the museum and the origins and give a plug for that particular museum in Arlington so that more folks will have found out about it. So be sure and tune in or log on or visit Coffee and Conversation next week at 10 o'clock on Wednesday. Until then time, be sure and check out again the community update for all of the information that I mentioned at the beginning of the program on June 1st. And have a good week.
I was going to mention Scott is also an award-winning blues musician.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he has a dual role there.
Well, maybe he can even play us a tune while he's
Maybe he's written the museum director blues for all we know.
right.
Yeah.
If I could just say one more thing, I haven't seen, and maybe I've missed it, but I haven't seen any feedback in the slide, in the chat. So if anyone feels more comfortable emailing, they know the email to send that to, do they not? The same that had the link, I would assume, to the presentation. So please, I
There
really
was no
cherish.
email. There was no
Oh.
email given.
There was the link. She's saying that if you go, oh, yeah, you're right.
Is there, could we put an email address in the chat?
The
Yeah.
email that I got, okay, Gary,
That
you
would be
handle that.
tremendous. Because I really cherish the feedback. It's hugely helpful to me, and I love negative feedback. I really do. So I'm not just saying that. I really
Why
appreciate it.
don't you just give the email verbally and we can, write it down in case we can't access the chat. You want to do that, Maureen?
Oh, I thought you were going to send it to, well, rather than sending it directly to me, I think people might be more comfortable sending it to the organization so that they don't have to tell me directly, or I'm happy to take it, but I just to the to send it to ANV. It's up to you.
Well, I think people would be perfectly fine sending it to you.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, then my address currently is here, I'm going to put in the chat.
There are some people who cannot access the chat, just so
Okay,
you
then
know.
I will say it out loud. It's M as in mom, F as in football, H as in happy, MFH 84 at georgetown.edu. So MFH 84 at gmail.edu.
I
You
thought
mean
you said Georgetown.
Georgetown, edu.
Georgetown, sorry, georgetown.edu.
It's in the chat.
Yep. And Maureen, I did put some feedback in the chat.
Great, I will look for it.
So.
Terrific. Thank you, Gary.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.